What if the problem isn't carbs? And the problem isn't fat? What if the real problem is eating them together? Because two major studies, one from Yale and one from Harvard, published just this year, just explained something that is going to completely change how you look at the food you eat every single day. When you combine fat and carbohydrates in the same meal, something happens in your brain that doesn't happen when you eat either one alone. Your brain goes haywire, and not in a small, subtle way. In a way that overrides your willpower, hijacks your reward system, and makes you eat way more than your body actually needs. And then on top of that, the Harvard study showed that this specific combination, refined carbs with animal fat, is directly linked to significantly higher rates of heart disease. Let me walk you through both of these findings, because together they tell a story about modern food that is genuinely alarming. Let's start with the Yale study, because this is the one that explains the mechanism behind why certain foods are basically impossible to stop eating. Researchers at Yale's Modern Diet and Physiology Research Center did something clever. They gave participants different types of foods and measured brain activity using imaging technology. They looked at foods that were high in fat only, foods that were high in carbs only, and foods that combined both fat and carbs together. And the results were striking. When people ate foods that were only high in fat, their brains responded in a predictable way. They could estimate the caloric value of the food pretty accurately. The reward signal in the brain was measurable but manageable. When people ate foods that were only high in carbohydrates, similar story. Predictable brain response, reasonably accurate calorie estimation, normal reward signal. But when people ate foods that combined fat and carbohydrates together, their brains went into overdrive. The reward signal was dramatically stronger than either fat or carbs alone. Not slightly stronger, dramatically stronger. And here's the part that really gets me. People became very poor at estimating how many calories those foods contained. They consistently underestimated. Their brain was telling them this food was worth more than it actually was in terms of energy, making them want more of it, while simultaneously making it harder to track how much they'd actually eaten. The senior author of the study, Dana Small, director of Yale's Modern Diet and Physiology Research Center, put it perfectly. She said when both fat and carbs are combined, the brain seems to overestimate the energetic value of the food. People were very accurate at estimating calories from fat, and very poor at estimating calories from carbohydrate. And when both were combined, the brain's reward signal fired even harder than the sum of its parts. This is not an accident. The Yale researchers believe this happens because the biological system that regulates how rewarding food is evolved to handle fat or carbs, not both at the same time. In nature, foods that are high in both fat and carbohydrates simultaneously are extremely rare, almost non-existent. Wild berries have carbs but barely any fat. Wild meat has fat and protein but almost no carbs. Nuts have some of both but in modest amounts with lots of fiber slowing everything down. The combination of high fat and high refined carbohydrates in a single food is almost entirely a modern invention. It's something food scientists deliberately engineer into processed foods. Chips, cookies, pizza, burgers, fried rice, donuts, croissants, cheesecake. Every single one of those foods combines high fat with high refined carbohydrates. And every single one of them produces that outsized reward signal in your brain that neither fat nor carbs would produce alone. That's not a coincidence. Food companies pay scientists to find exactly this combination. They call it the bliss point. And now we have brain imaging data showing exactly what that bliss point does to your reward system. It doesn't just make food taste good. It overrides the biological systems that are supposed to regulate how much you eat. Now let's talk about what happens to your body long-term when you eat this combination regularly, because this is where the Harvard study comes in. Published February 11, 2026 in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology, Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. This is one of the most respected nutrition research institutions in the world. They followed nearly 200,000 people over multiple years and tracked what they ate and what happened to their hearts. And here's the headline finding. The combination of refined carbohydrates with animal fats was specifically and strongly associated with higher rates of coronary heart disease. Not carbs alone, not fat alone, the combination. And on the flip side, the combination of high-quality carbohydrates, whole grains, vegetables, legumes, with plant-based unsaturated fats, was associated with about 15% lower risk of coronary heart disease compared to people eating lower-quality versions of either diet. The lead researcher, Dr. Chi Sun, said something that I think really nails it. Our study suggests that promoting an overall healthy eating pattern rather than strict macronutrient restriction should be a central strategy for the primary prevention of heart disease. In other words, it's not about avoiding carbs or avoiding fat. It's about which carbs and which fats, and whether you're combining them in the worst possible way. So what exactly is the worst possible combination? Refined carbohydrates plus animal fat. Think about what that looks like on a typical day for most people. White bread with butter? Refined carb plus animal fat. A burger on a white bun? Refined carb plus animal fat. Pizza with cheese and meat? Refined carb plus animal fat. Fries cooked in beef tallow? Refined carb plus animal fat. Cookies and cream ice cream? Refined carb plus animal fat. Mac and cheese? Refined carb plus animal fat. A bag of chips with cream-based dip? Refined carb plus fat. Now look at what the Harvard study found was protective. Whole grains with plant-based fats and proteins. Vegetables with olive oil, legumes with nuts, brown rice with fish. The pattern is obvious once you see it. The worst combination for your heart and your brain's ability to regulate how much you eat is refined processed carbohydrates paired with animal fat. The best combination is minimally processed whole food carbohydrates paired with plant-based unsaturated fats. Now here's the important nuance, because I want to be honest about what this research does and doesn't say. This does not mean fat is bad. Fat is essential. Your brain is 60% fat. Your hormones are made from fat. Every cell membrane in your body requires fat. This does not mean carbs are bad. Quality carbohydrates from whole food sources provide fiber, vitamins, minerals, and sustained energy your body genuinely needs. What this says is that the specific combination of low-quality, rapidly digested refined carbohydrates with animal-sourced saturated fats is uniquely problematic, both for your brain's ability to regulate intake and for your long-term cardiovascular health. And what it says about processed food is damning, because the modern food industry has essentially built its entire product lineup around exactly this combination. And this research is now showing us in precise neurological and epidemiological detail exactly how and why that's destroying people's health. So practically, what do you do? First, when you eat carbs, choose quality. Whole grains over refined grains. Vegetables over crackers. Beans over white bread. The more processing a carbohydrate has been through, the worse it is when combined with fat. Second, when you eat fat, choose quality. Olive oil over butter for most cooking. Fish over fatty processed meat. Avocados and nuts over cream-based sauces and cheese-heavy dishes. Third, be particularly suspicious of anything that combines both in a highly processed form. If you're eating something where you can't identify the original whole food ingredients, it's probably hitting that fat plus refined carb combination in exactly the way your brain can't resist and your heart can't handle long term. Fourth, you don't have to be perfect. This isn't about never eating pizza again. It's about understanding what's happening when you do eat it and making sure it's the exception rather than the foundation of your diet. Here's the bigger takeaway. The low-fat versus low-carb debate has dominated nutrition for decades. Both sides have had their moment. Both sides have their passionate defenders. And both sides have been missing something important. The problem isn't how much fat you eat. The problem isn't how many carbs you eat. The problem is the quality of those macronutrients, and most critically, whether you're combining the worst versions of both in every meal. Your brain is being hijacked by a combination that barely existed in nature until about 50 years ago. Your heart is paying the price for that hijacking over decades. Understanding that doesn't mean you need to become a perfect eater overnight. But it does mean you can look at your plate with new eyes. Not just asking, is this low carb or low fat? But asking what kind of carbs, what kind of fats, and what happens when they combine. That question might be the most important one in nutrition that nobody has been asking loudly enough. If this connected dots you've been missing, subscribe. I cover the research that actually explains what's happening inside your body when you eat, and I try to make it make sense for real life. Drop a comment. Did this change how you think about any foods you eat regularly? I'm genuinely curious what your reaction is to this one. See you in the next one.